Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. We do apologize for the delay because we were having a bit of a technical difficulty, but we are here and we are ready to go. I am Mrs. Anisha Carrot-Walcott, Senior Coordinator of the National Training Agency Tobago office, and I will be moderating this afternoon's session. This afternoon, for those of you, just before we get into that, for those of you who are joining us for the very first time and may be unaware of what the National Training Agency is about and what we do, just to tell you a little bit, we are an umbrella agency under the Ministry of Education that is responsible for effecting TVET reform in Trinidad and Tobago. TVET meaning Technical Vocational Education and Training. Our mission is to coordinate and facilitate workforce development through labor market research, quality assurance, national occupational standards, and lifelong learning. All right, this afternoon, Dr. Joseph will be diving into issues of trust, integrity, and self-management in her presentation, which is entitled Key Skills Required for Increased Employability in the 21st Century. Ladies and gentlemen, viewing audience, I now hand you over to Dr. Joseph.
Thank you, Anisha. Thanks for the opportunity to address persons who are interested in tech work. Ever so often as an HR practitioner and as a lecturer, I'm asked, what are the key skills to increase employability in the 21st century? What predicts success? What exactly are employers looking for? What are the skills that are necessary to be able to not only get a job, but to retain it? Once you enter the world of work, you have to assume that there are many applicants for a particular position and that they would all meet the basic requirements. They would have been shortlisted. And therefore, you have to ask yourself, are all the persons who are presenting for an interview, an assessment center, who would the employer choose? And therefore, apart from the prerequisite skills for the job, that mean the basic training and experience for the job, employers are looking for persons who have the soft skills so they can fit into the organization and they would not be disruptive and they will be able to achieve their goals as they achieve the organization goals, thereby creating the necessary synergies in the workplace. The first skill that employers are looking for is the whole skill of proactivity. Then they're looking for employees who are goal-oriented, persons who are creative and have practical experience, intelligence, persons as well who exhibit emotional intelligence, people who come into the organization and exhibit positive emotions, and people who have the right set of communication skills for the organization. Let's look at each one and see exactly what we are talking about. When we speak of proactivity, we say people who are very proactive, they are better able to manage themselves, manage their career, and manage their work in the organization. It means that they can anticipate what's happening out there and take decisive action. They also have political savvy. When we talk about political savvy, we're not talking only of electoral politics, but the politics within the organization. How do they navigate all of the issues that will confront them in the organization without being disruptive? We say that these persons, because they take action and they be able to anticipate what's happening, they can better influence the environment. Whereas on the other hand, if they are less proactive, they tend to be passive and reactive. It doesn't matter how things happen, they just go with the flow. And therefore, if you are very, very proactive, you are a benefit to the organization because you're able to predict your professional success. You'll be determined and recognize that your salary is pegged to your performance. You will understand that you will do things well to promote yourself and to promote the organization. So you'll be able to be promoted up the organization. You'll get greater career satisfaction. And at the same time, people who are proactive, they involve in their community to see how best they can better improve community life, not only for themselves, but for other members of the community. Proactive people generally don't sit by and criticize. criticize everything that's happening around them, whether in the country or in the organization itself. But if even something is impacting on them negatively, they look for a way to solve the problem. How do I get a solution to what is happening? So it's not just critiquing or criticizing, but contributing to a solution. And then an organization, whether it's a private sector organization to make money or whether it is a public service organization to provide service, you'll have the goals for the organization. And therefore, there are three types of persons that come into the organization in terms of goals. And then you have the person, while they might be performance goal oriented, they're only looking to produce results so that they look good in the eyes of others. And you might say that is a positive thing, but it has its negative. So therefore, while it is important to them that they look good, these persons are not prepared to take risks. They're not prepared to take any opportunities to learn. And ever so often, they try to outperform their colleagues because they want to look good. So that sometimes these people even own the work of others because they do not want to give anybody credit for anything. All the credit must go to them. And therefore, when you have people who are just goal-oriented in this kind of negative way, they tend to destroy mutual relationship in the organization, and there's always pulling and tugging within the business unit in which they are employed. And then you have a person, and the other person who we call the goal avoidance person. These person, it is not just about looking good. They don't want to look bad. So anything that will make them look bad, they stay away from it. These are the procrastinator people I like to call analysis paralysis. Before they do something, they analyze it, several copy they read, and they're always working on it because they're so afraid to take risks that they take longer to produce results. And of course, you have the learning goal-oriented persons. These are the persons who are always looking for opportunity to enhance themselves. They're not so much concerned with their image. They do not mind if they make a little error along the way. They are very interested in taking challenging assignment because they know that if even they make an error, they would learn from their mistake. So they will sit back and ask themselves, what are the learnings out of this error for me? And therefore, persons who are of this nature, they have very good coping strategies. So if even they make an error, they do not sit down and dwell on it for a long period of time. And therefore, if even they are faced with challenges, they look to see how they get out of that. They know when to persist with something and when to step back. And therefore, persons who are like that are more likely to be successful for themselves and for the organization, because organization, as you know, in today's society, they want that entrepreneurial spirit. They want people who are geared towards innovative qualities. And with innovation, you know there is a high level of risk. You could just look at what's happened with COVID. All those small business people may have challenge in managing because you may not have a lot of capital, but you're prepared to take risks, and organizations like that. And then the skill of creative and practical experience. And we always say that in the world of work, people who are successful must be creative, but you must be able to have that practical experience. I think that we call common sense. So that people who use creative intelligence, if even something is routine, you do it every day, you'll find joy in doing it. Even though it's mundane, you'll find innovative ways of doing the same thing. So you bring joy and happiness into something. You're a nurse, you have your routine, you might be doing something technical, but you find some way you are the IT technician, but you joy in doing your work, you're reading up, you're looking and see what might be the best practice, what innovative things they have in your particular field. And those are the kinds of person employers are looking for. And therefore, when you have people like that with practical experience, they tend to rely on their tacit knowledge. That is the little knowledge you have in your head. You remember what worked best for you, and you draw on that knowledge to work in the organization. You're able to go back and say, how did I get this? And pass it on, and you're able to share that tacit knowledge, knowing fully well that the knowledge you have in your head, unless you share it with others, nobody will be able. And therefore, when you have the tacit knowledge and you're able to assess the situation, what worked well for you in the past and may work well for you in the future, you would know. Even when a situation comes up, it may be between you and a senior, or you and a junior, you would know Gloria, leave it alone. Leave it alone. It's not going to work. And if I persist, it may just have a flare up and work negatively for the organization. And therefore, people who have practical and creative intelligence are better able to influence the environment in which they work, and not just influence the environment for the positive. And we cannot pay lip service to emotional intelligence. As a matter of fact, even at the senior level in organization, even at the junior level, sometimes emotional intelligence will determine whether an employer take you. What then is emotional intelligence? I would say it's a predictor for success. It is people who can display skills where you know yourself, you're self-aware, you know your strengths, you know your weaknesses, and we talk about that. People who are empathetic, you understand to walk in the shoes of others, you're able to understand your own and manage your own emotion as you try to manage. So therefore, when you have conflict in the organization, because you can manage yourself, you're in a better position to manage your conflict quite easily. You know when to push forward, when to step back. And therefore, in stressful time, if your emotionally intelligence is happening now in COVID, you're able to know how to navigate. And, you know, people may call, how are you coping? Like, I'm coping fine, because you find a creative way. Now is the time to bring out your little board game and do something. And that's what you're able to do. And therefore, emotional intelligent persons are better able to cope with the ups and downs of organizational life. So you didn't get the increase that you want. Your boss didn't give you the recognition that you were looking for. He stole your work and put his name on it. And therefore, instead of giving you the credit and say, thank you for, I've done this because of the help of the others, and no mention was made of you that you contributed to the success, you will just say, I'm going to leave that alone. Another opportunity might present itself. And therefore, emotional intelligent persons are better able to cope with the uncertainty in the world around them and the organization itself. And because they are committed to their own self, they're able to drive employees' commitment, they're able to motivate themselves, as well as to put things within the organization to help others to motivate themselves. And therefore, they're able to communicate effectively, because you're always trying to know what to say and how to say it. Because in communication, you have to be able to understand the other person in order to be able to communicate your message. And therefore, I said before, they're better able to manage conflict. And at the end of the day, the less conflict in organization is more the organization could perform. Because in organization, it's not that the work is hard, it's the people issues in organization that sometimes causes the organization to go adrift. And therefore, positive emotion. What a positive emotion. People who are positive and think positively all the time, they bring out the best in themselves. I think I can do it. I know I can do it. You have seen all those little cartoons as youngsters. And therefore, that positive kind of emotion, organization and employers like that. And therefore, when you have positive emotions like hope and pride, it serves many purposes in driving yourself to achieve results and, by extension, the organization. And therefore, once you're positive, and even though you don't have all the facts and all the information, you're going to go and look for information, and therefore you become very flexible. So COVID-19 and the pandemic, people might think it was a negative thing, but even within COVID-19, you can say, let me look for opportunities in terms of how, and if you have to work from home, how do I do my work at home? And therefore, for me, it might create a positive thing. I may be able to hone some other skill that I've been hoping to do. But because I'm home, it provides me an opportunity to do just that. So that's why positive people, they take a bad situation and look for the best in it. And therefore, as we said, they're able to overcome bad experience, solve problems, and therefore go to solutions immediately. In contrast, if you are negative all the time, and I've seen negative people in organization, they all feel fearful, they're anxious. So when they come into the workplace angry and they're resentment, don't matter what success, and even their success stories in Trinidad with COVID, they look for the negative. Okay. So we down to 116 and only 8 data. We have flattened the curve. But don't you think they should have given me, instead of $2,000, $5,000, instead of giving me a bag with flour and rice, maybe they should have given me champagne in my bag as well, because you feel that people owe you something, and that's when you have a lot of negativity pent up in you, and organizations don't like that. So therefore, as we said before, what skills are managers are looking for? Apart from the specialist skills, the soft skills. And those are the soft skills that you can't measure. You can't touch emotional intelligence, you can't touch positive emotions, but those are the things that oil the wheel in organization in terms of what pull the organization together. And as we move in the organization, especially higher up in the organization, managers and employers are looking for leadership. And then we talk about everyday leadership. And what is leadership? And maybe we talk about servant leadership, but there's leadership based on situations. So we talk about situational leadership. So sometimes you might have to be charismatic. Sometimes you have to step back and sometimes we call it a leader follower. You follow in terms of to show and you lead by example. And therefore you have to recognize as well that in the organization, it's not so much I, but the we, the upside down of me, and therefore you go to teamwork. And therefore, how do you bring the persons together to achieve? Bearing in mind that if you have the collective effort of a team, you're able to achieve so much more. And therefore, how do you communicate? And the style of communication is important. When we talk about communication, we talk about both verbal and non-verbal communication. We as West Indian, we talk about that body language thing. Our mouth is saying one thing, but our body is sending out a different message. So we have to guard against that. And as you come into the organization and you're going out to look for a job, it's not just to apply for a job and know the job. Know the job as it fits within the organizational setting. So the whole issue of cultural awareness. You must understand the culture, the norms, the values, the philosophy of the organization, and see how you can work within that setting. And as such, how will the organization culture affect your performance, and how were you able to fit in and not change the culture and stick out like a sore thumb in the organization? And employers like people who can manage their time for project management, coming in within time, arriving on work on time, taking your lunch 1 hour and being there. And even in time management, as you move higher up, you may have to go beyond the call of duty. You may have to work extended hours, and all of those things you have to look at. And therefore, as problems emerge, how do you solve those problems? Managers are interested in that. And therefore, as we are saying, as you have the employable skills, they can be broken down into 4 parts. We have the traditional intellectual skills. You are at a university, you in TVET, you learn certain theory. And therefore, how then do you bring that theory that you learn in an academic institution into the world of work? How then do you go in and look for the taken for granted assumptions in the workplace and apply those theories, that knowledge that you would have gained from theory, to change those assumptions for the better? Managers are looking at it. They don't want to know, okay, you know what Maslow said, you know what motivation says, you know what this one Herzberg said, you know what this one said, but how does that transfer to the world of work? And as such, you have to be able to make that quantum leap from theory to practice, and employers want that. And therefore, do you have the ability to logically examine things and on the basis of evidence? People see, and as such, when you read something on Facebook or wherever, how do you know if it's the truth? Do you have the ability to discern facts from fiction? And those are the kinds of things that managers are looking for. And therefore, for us, the key skills would be communication. How do you communicate? Whether it's written communication, as I said, can you write good reports? Can you write a letter in terms of your delivery, your choice of words, and knowing when to speak, when to lower your voice, and so on? And how well can you work with others? Those interpersonal skills that are so important. And therefore, at an interview, apart from the questions that are there to discern whether you have the requisite skill for the job, employers are going to look for your personal attribute. Are you self-reliant? Could they rely on you to do something? If you're given a task, now in COVID, you're expected to work at home. Are you working at home? And therefore, to what extent are you adaptable? And therefore, if you're adaptable, are you displaying behavioral flexibility? Is your behavior flexible? Do you know when to change your behavior? What are the norms of the organization? And are you creative? Can you contribute to something new in the organization? And to what extent are you using common sense? Although we talk about common sense, we find that common sense sometimes is not common at all. Sometimes and the average person standing by will say, how do you get here? Because you have not, in a logical and sequential way, on the examination of facts, come to a solution. And therefore, the managers and employers look for people who have excellent intrapersonal skills, the skills that you're able to not only talk to a person, but you go within yourself and you can make behavioral change and adapt to what is happening in the world of work and acting as well to environmental pressures. And therefore, managers want to know that even as you come into their organization, you have a knowledge of the organization and how the organization works, whether it's hierarchical, flat, structured, or what have you, and therefore you know the power distance within an organization. How do you manage that? Even though you're friendly with the boss and outside you're on a first name basis, but in the organization is Mr. That or Mrs. That, and therefore, to what extent you can adapt to the change in the world of work or the change in environment. And I might be talking a lot about COVID-19, but COVID-19 has brought us a lot of change. And therefore, in the workplace, even as we prepare to go back out to work, how adaptable are you going to be when you get out there and you can't work the normal 8 to 4 and you may have to be working 6 to 12 midnight? And that is what may be required in the given moment because of the environmental pressures. And people are going to test to what extent they want you around if you can do this change. And therefore, even as you adapt to changes, you might have to acquire new skills. I like to brag that I have been lecturing now for about 18 years or so, or 20 years, or maybe even more, who knows. And I have never done online training, but for this webinar, I had to be able to learn the new skills, how to navigate and use it. So therefore, it is the persons who are flexible, who is adaptable, that the employer is looking for. And therefore, there is a growing demand for organization skills. People know how to manage their tasks at hand, and managing your performance, while it might be for your supervisor to give you the annual performance appraisal, it is left to you to manage your performance. And if you manage the performance and you get the results, you might get the reward, the performance bonus at the end of the year, the annual increment. But at the same time, to what extent you are managing your performance to develop the business. And therefore, managers are looking, as we said before, problem-solving skills, a person who is engaged in strategic thinking, a plan of action. This is happening. What am I going to do next? Don't let it be trust on you. You're proactive, so you're planning and you're strategizing going forward. Your conceptual skills. As things happen, how do you understand what is happening? How do you analyze information as it comes to you to discern what is fact, what is fiction, so that you can make a decision on the basis of the facts presented, using a bit of common sense, but using the information and also the practical experience that you would have gained from the job, and maybe even some of the theory that you would have learned in the academic setting. And therefore, we like to say that in the organization, things happen because you have people in the organization. Even though you have technology and you have machine, it is the people who make things happen, people in the organization. And to what extent you have those good people skills. You know, sometimes I say, managers, it has been proven, and leaders in the organization, supervisors and chief executive officers, sometimes they are the source of the problems in organization because they cannot manage themselves, and by extension, they cannot manage relationship in the workplace. They do not know the importance of teamwork, and they cannot communicate well with others. And therefore, which brings us to the issue of trust. What is trust? And it is trust is the perception of how you see somebody. I trust Mrs. Edwards-Joseph. I trust Dr. Joseph. She promised that she will do the webinar today, and she was there. She wouldn't let me down. Having given you a commitment, I can trust you to come. So it's the confidence that people place in you, in your words or your action. And we like to say trust. You have to earn trust. Oh, I may perceive you by what you say, and I think that you are trustworthy. And therefore, there are three characteristics in understanding trust: uncertainty, risk, and perception. So there's uncertainty right now in the time of COVID. I trust persons who have to work from home that they are working at home. And I trust you that if even a risk is presented, you will do the right thing. And that is my perception of you as an employee. And therefore, we depend on trust sometimes when we do not have sufficient information of a person, of a situation, and therefore we cannot completely control what is happening. But because we cannot control what is happening, you will put trust in the person to do the right thing because it is the right thing to do. So it goes to integrity. What is your integrity in going forward? And therefore, as you employ persons, you will trust and what they have on their CV is correct. You will trust that the certificate that they present for the job is theirs and they didn't change the name. And therefore, if the person's competence is being judged because they have a master's degree, you trust them that they're going to be reliable, they have the knowledge to do what they have been employed for, and therefore they become predictable that their performance will be up to par. And therefore, if you trust a person, you trust that that person will be fair and that person will have the welfare of the organization and the persons within the organization, and that person will act morally fair to everybody. And that person will use what we like to call the moral compass and the moral ethical compass in making decisions as they go forward. And this feeds right into the whole integrity. And to what extent you have your own value system. And does your value system meet with the value system of the organization in which you're going to work? And therefore, what are your personal standards? What are your moral, how do you make your moral judgment? And to what, whether it's integrity, fair play, you're going to be honest, and therefore, if you have your ethical standards, you're going to do the right thing because it is the right thing to do. And therefore, you're going to have your ethical standards. You cannot be bribed. You would not cheat. You would not steal. You would not steal company money. And therefore, you'll give 8 hours work for 8 hours pay. You may even get 10 and take 8 hours pay because you're honest and you're a person of integrity and you can be trusted. And especially in your attitude towards change, if you're trustworthy and you have moral standards, ethical dilemmas would not come up in the organization. You wouldn't do something unknown to your employer. And therefore, if you have integrity, it also shows to what extent you will be flexible and you will adapt. And as we're talking about COVID, you're home and you're working, you're required to work at home, the question you might ask yourself, how then am I meeting my obligations to the organization? And people want to know, even when the boss is away, you must be able to show by an issue of trust that I trust the person, that the person is going to meet the obligation to the organization. So whether it's work at home, whether it's extended hours working on Saturday, and the person has to put in for overtime, and the person put in 30 hours overtime, if you have good integrity and the person trusts you, they wouldn't have to question what you have submitted. And therefore, if you act consistent with your values and your ethical stance, then the organization will trust you, and therefore you will be trusted to make ethical decisions. You will let your values guide all your decision-making process. And as we said before, you wouldn't have any ethical dilemma. When we talk about ethical dilemma, it doesn't mean that you're doing something that is illegal, because you could be doing something and is well within the law, but it speaks to ethics. Is it right? Is it wrong based on ethical standards that you have set for yourself, or the ethical or standards or the values set for the organization or the philosophy of the organization? So managers and employers want to know all of that about a person. And which brings us to the self-management, the art of reflection. we say that reflective people are good people to work with. If you did something wrong, you're very reflective and say, I need to apologize. And employers like people who can manage themselves. We can make errors. It is human to make errors, but even when you make errors and you reflect and you say, I should not have done that, and you would go back and you will correct it. If you're self-aware, you're able to manage yourself. You're given a task, you're given something, you're able to analyze yourself and understand yourself, understand your strength, understand your weakness, what are the opportunities and what threats there might be for you in the organization. It calls for a constant self-examination of yourself in terms of your own personal SWOT, will help you to plan ahead and reflect on your previous experience, learn from those previous experience as you go forward. So managers like people who have reflective skills. They know how to evaluate your own performance. So even when you come for the end of the year, your performance appraisal, there'll be no surprises. Even if you're not doing something well, if you're doing self-awareness, you will call for help. And therefore, you'll be able to make conclusions on your own performance and take appropriate action to address whatever shortcomings that you may exhibit. So if your computer skills are not so good, you will maybe go look for a course. If it is that you have to do project management as part of your job and you have no training in project management, you will go and get the requisite skills in order to be able to do what you're doing. And therefore, your success at self-management determines your own judgment. Sometimes it is best that you could use other tools of analysis to understand yourself. We don't have time for things like Gerari window, where you sit with someone and you ask someone, tell you honestly what they think about you, what are your major strengths, what are your major weaknesses, what you need to improve on. And therefore, once you're managing yourself, you're able, as I said before, based on the weaknesses that you identify, plan your personal development, which should be continuous development. Managers and employers like people who, for the most part, are committed to continuous development. A person, okay, I have my first degree, or I have my first TVET qualification. I think I qualify enough. I don't want to do anything. I'm too old, I'm too tired, I don't have the time. Managers like people who that individual is learning something all the time. Is a spiral. As you learn something new comes in. That is what drives the world. You have to plan ahead and plan how are you going to manage yourself. And therefore, if you're doing self-awareness, you will be, as I said, you'll be engaged in continuous self-development. You're very reflective. You will plan your action going forward. You focus on your continuous skills that may be lacking in order to improve yourself. When you improve your skills, by extension, you use those skills to improve your performance. And if you're improving your performance, it stands to reason that the performance of the organization would be improved. Right? And I like to say, if you're engaging in continuous employment, it's a benefit to yourself and it's also a benefit to the employer, which we touch on. And this is analogous to professional development. You're building your skills. And if you're building your skills, you're not only building your skills for yourself, you're building your skills for the organization. Continuous development allows you to learn new skills because of the change in environment. The only thing that is constant in life is change, and therefore if change is constant, you have to prepare yourself for the change in the world of work, whatever your choice of job. And therefore, if you're able to manage your own self-development, you're better able to manage conflict, you're very motivated, and whatever happens to you, you will then be able to have all the skills for the work, and you will have all the skills that are necessary. And we like to say you have all the tenets that will drive you for success in everyday life within your own personal self and the organization. I thank you, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Joseph, for your very invaluable contribution here this afternoon. We know that this is a very challenging time for everyone, and we really want to thank you for taking the time out to share all this information with us. And knowledge is power, and you are not keeping it for yourself, as you would have mentioned in your presentation. So I thank you so much for that and supporting the NTA's TVET webinar series. Okay, audience, viewing audience, we have come to the question and answer segment of the webinar. And Dr. Joseph, I'll be throwing out some questions to you from our viewing
Good.
audience. And our first question: employers always claim to want persons with the right attitude, but how is it that they often promote persons who do not have many of those skills?
Well, when we talk about attitude, we also talk about behavior because your attitude affects your behavior. And when we're talking about skills, is the soft skills. And we did not talk today about skills to fix a computer, skills to calculate numbers. And therefore, right behavior in an organization, whether it's emotional intelligence, that will affect your behavior. So behavior is important. As a matter of fact, one of the major thing in HR, we said that we don't recruit for skills. We recruit for behavior and behavioral fit. We recruit for attitude. And the attitude is exhibited in the skills we just discussed.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Our next question: what kind of support systems can schools or employers put in place to strengthen their students or employees mastering these skills?
Well, as I said before, there are various tools of self-analysis to determine what are the right skills that you can help your students in the workplace. And there are many tools of self-assessment. So let us take the simple one of emotional intelligence and managing your emotion. We talk about tools like the Girard window, which is a tool that a lot of psychologists use, where you pay a person in an organization who know one another, and the person honestly tell you what they like about you, what they don't like, what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses. And in the educational setting, teachers can use that to assess person in terms of the right behavior. And there are several things that you can put people in a situation and test them to see how they would act. You will show them what is the right thing and to see what extent they are honest with themselves, and you can develop those soft skills, because soft skills can be taught. You can teach someone how to communicate well. You can teach someone how to manage conflict in the even in school, because ever so often you have fights around young children and so on because they can't manage their emotions. So managing your emotions can be taught, and it can be made part of the syllabus. And the reason why I tell you that, there was an example, because I teach for English University, and the persons were going into the world of work. They were very bright, but they were dysfunctional. They were dysfunctional because they couldn't manage their emotion. They thought they knew everything, and they were not prepared to listen to the views of others. And then you can teach someone to be emotionally intelligent, and you can teach someone to be a good leader. So that can be taught even at school.
Okay, thank you. Before we
Mhm.
move on to the next question, I want to apologize again to our viewers for the delayed start. We were having some technical difficulties at the beginning of the stream, so that lended itself to the delay in our broadcast. So I do apologize again. All right, Dr. Joseph, the next question. How, in your experience, can an employer assess the soft skills of prospective candidates in the recruitment phase? That's one part of the question. And
Okay.
the next part, well, I'll ask the next part afterwards. Go ahead.
All right. If you're using interviews, you have to so design the interview process based on competencies. So we talk about competency-based assessment, and we say what are the skills, and you ask the questions to be able to get the answers, and from the answers you'll be able to go beyond the person answer. But much of the soft skills that employers look for, they look for in what we call those psychometric kind of questions, or like in assessment center, so that we what we do role play, or we give you a scenario and ask what would you do, or what did you do in a situation like that, and what was your learnings. So therefore, it is not just tell me what you know, tell me what you have done, or tell me what you would do. So you can create a little corner
Mhm.
of the room put the person in the scenario and then observe their person's behavior. Because there's the more and more interview is not a good predictor of behavior. And therefore you have to go beyond just asking the questions. For example, when you recruit judges, you don't recruit judge not only on their academic or their professional knowledge that they know the law, but the question of fit. How do you fit this job? In terms, can you be dispassionate and step away from emotions and coming, and how do you interpret and apply the law? So there are mechanisms that can be used to test for those soft skills. And it's not, for the most part, it's not just interview. But if you use an interview, it has to be designed on a competency-based interview system.
Okay. Well, I guess that kind of answered the other part of the question where people just say in an interview what sounds good to the interviewer.
No, not anymore. As I said, my previous job as director of personal administration, I conducted several interviews in assessment centers because I'm trained in assessment center methodologies as well. And therefore, how do you select a permanent secretary? How do you select a magistrate? How do you select the commissioner of police? And it's just not interviews, it's many phases of a selection process. And therefore, to what extent you have credibility in the process. So if a person tell you something, it is not good enough to just take it and tell me. You have to show me that you can do it.
Okay, yeah.
And more and more selection mechanisms, they are moving toward show me what you can do rather than tell me what you could do.
And that is what competency-based training is about.
At interviewing, and it's about show me what you can do. So therefore, if you come into me as a speech writer, don't tell me you wrote speech for the Prime Minister and you wrote. I am going to give you a scenario and I'm going to give you a little piece of paper and I'm going to give you 5 minutes. Then you go write a short 2 paragraph of the speech and bring it to me. And then I will then ask you, in terms of structure, why you thought it was important to start this way? Why was this particular word important? Why was this particular sentence important in the speech? You understand? You follow? Based on the scenario presented. So it's not no more tell me, to show me.
All right. We also need to acknowledge that sometimes teachers may not be equipped to teach soft skills. Are they being reactionary in this push for soft skills?
No, we are not. We are not. As a matter of fact, the problems in the organization are not caused, for the most part, by someone's inability to discharge the duties of the job, It is most problems is caused in the organization because of attitudes and behaviors in the organization. Dysfunctional attitudes and behavior because of the lack of the requisite skills to manage the issues as they emerge in the organization. People might be bright, very, very bright. I work with a young lady. As a matter of fact, she had a first class honors out of UE and she went on to have a master's in with distinction. And my God, that young lady was dysfunctional. It is only because I had the requisite soft skills that I took her under my wings. And I used to say to her, your attitude will determine your altitude. And she said, what do you mean by that? It's because you have bad attitude. I said, listen to me. Take time off to manage yourself. And therefore, you will be an excellent employee. If you could just bring your emotions under control. Everything was a flare-up. Everything was a conflict. Everything, people did not like you. And because you think someone did not like you, if they criticize your work, you are not prepared to listen to what the person was saying. Those soft skills are so important.
It is indeed. Okay. As you would have mentioned all of this, how can employers implement or facilitate soft skills in the workplace?
Well, that is not new. As a matter of fact, because continuous professional development is a relationship between you and management. Management should be able to assess all the employees and determine what you need to do to get the work done. And a situation occur in the workplace, more and more organizations are sending their employees to team building exercise to learn how to use the team. Where I work, I have sent persons on the soft skills, emotional intelligence training. As a matter of fact, we now say beyond emotional intelligence, emotional and spiritual intelligence. People who are spiritually grounded sometimes are better employees because they have a sense that there is a greater creator, they are able to work better in organ. So even when they are stressful, they can go to their God and pray. Those
Okay.
and as such, the employer must be committed to continuous development. We recognize that you will bring what we call the bring skills to the organization. But even as you bring skills to the organization, it may not be just bring skill that we need, or we may need much more than you're bringing. And therefore, managers should be able to do training needs assessment based on where the organization going, recognize where there may be gaps. The same kind of SWOT analysis that you're doing for yourself, organization should do SWOT of the employees in the organization and determine what are we going to do for the lower levels in the organization, the mid level in the organization, and at the senior level. Organization, like individuals, must be committed to continuous development of the employees and getting people in to develop those soft skills.
Okay. Thank
Mentoring
you.
and coaching. You see the mentoring and coaching bit? You mentor and you coach, you peer people, and you
Mm-hmm.
say, come, I take you. You see that young lady I took under my wing? Today she's at the top of her game. At the top of her
Excellent.
game, and she thanks me all the time. Sometimes she says to me, Dr. J, I was about to flare up, but I hear you in my head, and I tell myself, Nana, Dr. J will be shaming me, and I will say, calm down, and I will smile, and I'll say, no, let me hear your comments. You follow? Because you have
Okay.
to recognize, you have to mentor, and you have to coach persons within the organization, especially if they are bright, or if even they're not bright. But you will see some talent embedded in that particular individual.
Right. Okay. So, in your experience, Dr. Joseph, does the
Mhm.
competitive nature of the workplace get in the way of this, or the notion of positive work attitude and skills?
Not at all. Competition you can be negative competition or positive competition. Sometimes competition in the organization sometimes brings the best out of individuals.
Okay.
And
Yes, it
therefore,
is.
if you're competing for something, whether it's for the next senior position, and the person see that the system to get to that next level is fair, I have a chance. I know 5 of us are going and we are equally qualified. But the system to evaluate my ability to move forward is fair. People want to work with it because you're giving everybody an equal chance. The whole issue of equity. It's not divide and rule. It's not divide. So that because I like you, the like wouldn't come into play. I am determining person's ability to move forward in a competitive environment on the basis of the skill for the next position. And there is an effective system of equating or evaluating how that person moves to the next level is of great importance in organization.
Okay. All right, Dr. Joseph, we are all working from home. We know the challenges. This is
Uh-huh.
my final question to you. How have you been coping with this work from home policy that has been implemented?
Well, as I said to my daughter, excellent. And I often think we do not have enough hours in the day because I work from home, but I follow a routine. And my
Mhm.
daughter does a little thing with me on the side. And I get up in the morning at the same time as if I was going to the office, have my shower, have my breakfast, and I immediately get on my desk at my computer. I stop for a little while because I want to be in a position of knowledge. I'm looking for information, so I listen to the COVID update. And then I go back and I work again. I take my hour lunch, or even as I'm home, I don't even take a whole hour, half an hour lunch, and I get back. I have my evening snack, and I've gained some weight because I'm not exercising as much. But I even get in my exercise and my routine. I have my kitchen garden. Lettuce, cucumbers, whatever. I go and I look at that, and so far I think I have used all my coping skills, the soft skills that we're talking about. I have used those skills because I am home. I'm here with my husband, and I like to think sometimes you're a little miserable. But because I have the soft skills, I can handle, and by
Yeah.
now he's accustomed to me. So I have been handling quite well because I have been engaged in some behavioral flexibility. I wouldn't go out because I may be in the age group that COVID is looking for. So I am, for the most part, following instructions. Stay
Yes.
home, stay safe. So far, so good.
Excellent. I think it's about maintaining that routine that
Yes.
you're used to. And I think that is how it all works out and being able to cope with it. But we have, before we wrap up, one final question came in from our viewing audience. Should life skill teachers be introduced into workplaces instead of
Of
in school?
course, of course, people don't know how to cope, and there is too much focus on academic. And I'm not saying academic is not important because I am an academic,
Yes.
but at the same time, there should be a mixture. How then do you get that first person who is excellent, who has, and the person cannot manage themselves? They, in the first opportunity, they want to leave the job, they want to walk off, they want to tell off the boss. They go into a situation and they're better qualified than the boss, and they want to show the boss, you don't know nothing. Hello. So it should be taught in the school setting, of
Yes,
course. It
definitely.
is essential. It is essential.
I fully endorse that. It should. It,
It is
I
essential.
think that word essential is going around. It definitely is essential.
It is essential. Yes.
All right. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings our final question for today, which brings us to the end of this very informative session. Thank you very much for participating. Again, I have to apologize for the delayed start, but I really want to thank you for participating in today's webinar. All of us at the NTA extend special thanks to Dr. Joseph for your invaluable contribution here today and for joining us on this adventure. This being our first remotely delivered webinar. As we sign off today, I want to encourage all of you, or we want to encourage all of you, to continue to stay at home, stay safe, and remember, we are all in this together. God bless you.
Okay, thank you.